The autumn leaves crunched beneath Richard, Montgomery's polished shoes as he walked the familiar path through Oakwood Cemetery. At 62, he had made this journey every Sunday for the past 3 years, ever since his son Daniel had been taken from him. The grief never quite left, just settled into a dull ache that he carried everywhere. Richard was a tall man with silver hair that caught the afternoon light, his expensive navy suit a stark contrast to the natural surroundings. He had built Montgomery Industries from nothing, turning a small tech startup into a Fortune 500 company. But all the money in the world couldn't bring back his boy. As he approached Daniel's grave, Richard stopped abruptly. Someone was already there. A small figure knelt before the headstone, and he could hear the soft sounds of crying. It was a child, a little girl who looked to be about 7 or 8 years old. She wore a worn olive-green jacket that was slightly too big for her, and her blonde hair fell in gentle waves past her shoulders. Richard's first instinct was to turn away, to give her privacy. But something made him stay. Perhaps it was the sight of someone else who understood his pain, or perhaps it was simply the protective instinct that any parent feels when they see a child in distress. He took a careful step forward. The girl must have heard him because she turned, revealing a face streaked with tears. Her blue eyes were red and puffy, and she clutched something small in her hand. "I'm sorry," Richard said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude. This is my son's grave." The girl's eyes widened, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Your son?" she whispered. This was your Daniel?" Richard felt his throat tighten. "Yes, did you know him?" The girl nodded, her small hands trembling. "He saved my life," she said simply. Richard found himself moving closer, his legs suddenly weak. "What do you mean?" The girl wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her cheek. "My name is Emma," she began. 3 years ago, I was really sick. The doctors said I needed a new heart, but my mama didn't have money for the operation. We were on a waiting list, but I was getting worse every day." She looked down at the gravestone, tracing Daniel's name with her finger. "Then one day the hospital called. They said they had a heart for me, a perfect match. Someone had died, and their family had donated their organs. That person was Daniel." Richard felt the world tilt beneath him. He had known that Daniel's organs had been donated. It was what Daniel had wanted, what he had made clear when he'd gotten his driver's license. But Richard had never known the recipients, had never asked. The pain had been too raw, too immediate. Knowing that parts of his son lived on in strangers had been both a comfort and an agony he couldn't face. Now, looking at this small girl with tears running down her face, he understood. Daniel's heart beat in her chest. His son's generous, loving heart kept this child alive. Richard's knees buckled, and he sank to the ground beside Emma. His own tears came then, hot and unstoppable. 3 years of carefully controlled grief broke free, and he wept openly for the first time since the funeral. Emma reached out tentatively and placed her small hand on his arm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to make you sad." No, Richard managed between sobs. "You haven't made me sad. You've given me something I didn't know I needed." They sat together in silence for a while, two people bound by loss and life, by death and renewal. The sun filtered through the autumn trees, casting golden light across the graves and the living alike. Finally, Richard found his voice again. "Tell me," he said gently. "Tell me about yourself. I want to know about the girl who carries my son's heart." Emma smiled shyly. "I'm 8 years old now. I live with my mama in an apartment on the east side. Mama works 2 jobs, at the diner during the day and cleaning offices at night. We don't have much, but we have each other." "And the operation?" Richard asked. "You're healthy now?" "Yes, sir. I take medicine every day and I see the doctor a lot. But I can run and play and go to school. I couldn't do any of that before. I was too tired all the time." Richard noticed the item clutched in her hand. "What do you have there?" Emma opened her palm to reveal a small, worn photograph. "This is a picture of Daniel. I found it in an old newspaper article about the accident. I printed it at the library. I wanted to know what he looked like, the person who saved me." She held it out to Richard. It was a photo from Daniel's college graduation, his smile bright and his whole life ahead of him. Richard's throat constricted again, but this time there was something else mixed with the pain. something that felt almost like peace. "He was a good boy," Richard said quietly. "He was studying to be a doctor. He wanted to help people. I think he would be so happy to know that he saved you." "I come here every week," Emma confessed. "I bring flowers sometimes when Mama has a little extra money. I tell him about school and about the books I'm reading. I hope that's okay." Richard looked at this brave little girl who had been carrying her own burden of grief and gratitude, and his heart broke open in a new way. "It's more than okay," he said. "It's wonderful." They talked for over an hour, sitting beside Daniel's grave as the afternoon light grew longer. Emma told him about her third-grade class, about her best friend Sarah, about how she loved art and wanted to be a painter someday. Richard listened, soaking in every word, marveling at her spirit and resilience. When Emma finally said she needed to go home before her mother got back from work, Richard stood and helped her to her feet. "Emma," he said carefully, "would it be all right if I saw you again? Maybe I could meet your mother." Emma's face lit up. "Really? You'd want to?" "Very much," Richard said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They exchanged phone numbers, and Richard watched as Emma walked away, her small figure disappearing down the path. When she was gone, he turned back to Daniel's grave and placed his hand on the cool stone. "Thank you, son," he whispered. "Thank you for this gift." The following Saturday, Richard found himself standing outside a modest apartment building on the east side of town. He had called Emma's mother, Jennifer, earlier in the week, and they had arranged to meet. He carried with him a large box, and his heart hammered with nervous anticipation. Jennifer answered the door, a tired-looking woman in her mid-30s with the same blonde hair as her daughter. Her eyes were wary at first, but when she saw Emma's excited face peeking around her mother's legs, they softened. "Mr. Montgomery," Jennifer said, extending her hand. "Emma has told me so much about meeting you. Please come in." The apartment was small but immaculately clean. Second-hand furniture was arranged carefully, and Emma's artwork decorated the walls. It was clear that Jennifer worked hard to make a home for her daughter, despite their limited means. They sat in the tiny living room, and Richard placed the box on the coffee table. "I wanted to bring you something," he said. "I've spent the last few days going through Daniel's things. I thought Emma might like to have some of them, to know him better." He opened the box carefully. Inside were photo albums, Daniel's favorite books, some of his artwork from when he was young, and his college sweatshirt. "These are pieces of who he was," Richard explained. "I'd like Emma to have them." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Montgomery, we can't accept—" "Please," Richard interrupted gently. "It would mean everything to me." Daniel loved to share. He was always giving things away, helping people. This is what he would want. Emma reached into the box with reverent hands, pulling out one of the photo albums. Richard sat beside her and opened it, showing her pictures of Daniel as a boy, then as a teenager, and finally as a young man. He told her stories about each photo. Daniel's first day of school, his Little League games, his high school graduation, his volunteer work at the Children's Hospital. As he talked, Richard realized something profound. In sharing Daniel's life with Emma, he was keeping his son's memory alive in a way he never could have done alone. The grief was still there, but it was transforming into something else, something more bearable. Love that transcended death. They spent hours together that day. Jennifer made tea, and they talked about everything and nothing. Richard learned that Jennifer had been a single mother since Emma was 2, that she worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter, that the medical bills from Emma's operation had left them deeply in debt despite insurance. As the afternoon wore on, Richard made a decision. "Jennifer," he said carefully, "I'd like to help you. Please let me explain before you say no." He told her about his company, about his wealth, about how empty his life had felt since Daniel died. "I'm not trying to buy anything or replace anyone," he said, "but I have resources that could make your lives easier. I'd like to set up a trust fund for Emma's education, and I'd like to help with your medical debt." Jennifer shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "That's too much. We can't—" "My son's heart beats in your daughter's chest," Richard said softly. "That makes us family in a way, and family helps family." Over the following months, Richard became a regular presence in Emma and Jennifer's lives. He didn't try to replace Emma's father or take over their lives. Instead, he became something like a grandfather, a role he embraced with his whole being. He attended Emma's school plays and art shows. He took her to museums and the library, feeding her love of learning and creativity. He had long conversations with Jennifer over coffee, learning about her dreams and fears, offering support and friendship. In turn, Emma and Jennifer gave Richard something precious, a reason to look forward instead of back. They reminded him that life continued, that love could survive loss, that joy was still possible. Richard also made changes to his company. Inspired by Daniel's legacy and Emma's story, he established the Daniel Montgomery Foundation, dedicated to helping families with children who needed organ transplants. He used his wealth and influence to raise awareness about organ donation, to help cover medical costs for families in need, to support research into transplant medicine. One Sunday afternoon, nearly a year after that first meeting at the cemetery, Richard and Emma sat together at Daniel's grave. It had become their ritual, this weekly visit. Sometimes Jennifer came too, but today it was just the two of them. Emma was drawing in a sketchbook, creating a portrait of Daniel from the photographs Richard had given her. She had real talent, Richard thought, watching her small hands move confidently across the page. "Mr. Montgomery," Emma said without looking up from her drawing, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you think Daniel knows about us? About how we're friends now?" Richard considered the question carefully. He had never been particularly religious, but since meeting Emma, he had begun to believe in something larger than himself. "I think he does," Richard said. "And I think he's happy about it." Emma nodded, satisfied. "I think so too. I can feel it sometimes, right here." She placed her hand over her heart, over the place where Daniel's heart beat steadily. "It's like he's telling me everything is going to be okay." Richard felt tears prick his eyes again, but they were different now. Not the tears of despair he had cried for so long, but tears of gratitude and wonder. "You know," he said, "you've taught me something important." "What's that?" "That love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It finds new ways to exist in the world. Daniel's love is here, in you, in your kindness and your courage. And my love for him is here too, in the way I care about you and your mother." Emma set down her pencil and turned to look at him. With the wisdom that children sometimes possess, she said, "Maybe that's why hearts can be donated, so that love keeps going." Richard pulled her into a gentle hug. This remarkable child who had brought light back into his dark world. "You're absolutely right," he whispered, as they sat together in the peaceful cemetery, surrounded by the evidence of lives lived and lost. Richard Montgomery understood something he had been searching for since the day his son died. Grief and joy were not opposites. They could exist together, intertwined like the roots of trees feeding each other, creating something new and beautiful. Daniel was gone, but his legacy lived on, not just in Emma's beating heart, but in the foundation that bore his name, in the families that were helped, in the awareness that was raised, and most of all, in the love that connected Richard to Emma and Jennifer, a love that transcended biology and circumstance. The autumn leaves continued to fall, marking the passage of time. But in that cemetery, beside that grave, a different kind of renewal was taking place, a renewal of hope, of purpose, of connection. Richard had thought his life was over when Daniel died. Emma had shown him it was just beginning again. They stayed until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Emma finished her drawing and placed it at the base of the headstone, held down by a smooth river stone. It was a beautiful likeness of Daniel, captured with care and love by the girl whose life he had saved. As they walked back down the path together, Emma's small hand in Richard's larger one, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He felt whole. Not the same as he had been, he would never be that person again. But whole in a new way, scarred but healed, changed but stronger. "Same time next week?" Emma asked as they reached the cemetery gates. "Same time next week," Richard confirmed. "I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world." And as they parted ways, Richard Montgomery looked up at the darkening sky and sent out a silent thank you to his son. "Thank you for your generous heart. Thank you for saving Emma. And thank you for bringing us together." Because in the end, that was what love did. It connected people across time and space and even death itself. It found ways to persist, to grow, to heal. And sometimes, in its most profound moments, it brought strangers together and made them family. The story of Richard and Emma was just beginning, but it was built on a foundation that would last. Gratitude, compassion, and the unshakable belief that every life touches others in ways we can never fully understand. Daniel's brief time on Earth had created ripples that would continue long after he was gone, touching lives and changing hearts. And in a quiet cemetery where the autumn leaves fell like blessings, a billionaire and a little girl visited a grave together, keeping alive the memory of a young man who had given the ultimate gift. Love, after all, was the only thing that truly lasted forever.